you can really cater your marketing to that audience. Like if I was talking to doctors, if doctors was my client, I would use the word, you and your patients. If I was
Yeah.
talking to nonprofits, I say you and your donors or your constituents. If I
Mhm.
talk to lawyers, I would say you and your clients. So using different wordings means I speak the language of your or the jargon of your industry. Therefore, I'm one of you. And even though you won't be able to, get every single organization under the sun, the ones you do get will be much more tailored, much more specific. You'll get basically more fish as a result of it.
Hello, hello, hello. It's Holly Rustick here with Grant Writing and Funding. And I'm super excited to have another change maker on the podcast today. And that is Alex Lappa. And he is the Salesforce Architect for nonprofits. And he has Dryad Consulting as his business. He's been a nonprofit consultant or consultant for more than 20 years. Then he niched down a nonprofit consultancy a few years ago. And we're going to go over all of that today and really talk about your journey as far as like being in the consulting world, working with nonprofits, what you're doing to support them, and all of the great things. And before I let you talk, I also want to drop one more bomb is that you also have a podcast. So I know if you guys are out there listening on your podcast players, go check out Agents of Nonprofits. That's it. I keep wanting to say Agents of Change when I see yours because you have like all the superpower people or the superhero people as your graphic. But yeah, definitely go check it out, y'all. Check out the podcast, Agents of Nonprofits. Well, here, welcome, Alex. Welcome to the
Thank you very
podcast.
much. And I love the way you introduced me as the Salesforce architect for nonprofit, as if there's only one.
That's right. There's only one. It's you. So you're going to be talking all about this today. But yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast. And it's so fun because I just was on your podcast. I love having other podcast hosts on my podcast because y'all know how to like do interviews. And it's just fun to see that you're out there really making a lot of change as well in the world, right? So excited to have you here. And I know we're going to talk about some things that you do for nonprofits, but before we get there, I really want to talk about your business as well. And as you mentioned, you've been like in the green room before we kicked off that you've been doing consulting now for a long time, like 21 years. Did I get that right?
Yeah, 21
Yeah.
since 2003.
Wow. Okay. So tell us your story because a lot of people are like, "Ooh, this is new. Being a digital nomad is new for me," or like we didn't even have that language back in the day, right? So like, yeah, tell me your transition. Like, how was that for you? What were you working in corporate? Were you working with nonprofits? Like, where were you at? And why did you switch to consultancy?
Yeah, so I started basically, I'm a computer engineer for education, and I worked for about 6 years as a software developer. And I really enjoyed it, writing code. It was very low level, but there was a lot of pleasure in it. And then in 2003, I was offered a position to do what's called Siebel CRM. This is before Salesforce. Back in those times, Siebel was the most popular CRM. And I was basically given a contract. So I had to quickly spin up a business. And what was supposed to be like a 6-month contract ended up being 6 years. And then at some point, I guess 11 years ago at this now, I was with a client that was switching from Siebel to Salesforce. I joined them on that journey, and then I have never looked back. Salesforce is just a better CRM. And now, of course, it's #1 in the world. And I would say then about 3 years ago at this point, about 3 years ago, I decided that I was doing Salesforce implementations and consulting for various industries, but the nonprofit industry was the one that I really enjoyed with. It resonated with me quite a bit. And the one reason for that is I want to have impact. I want to have change. I want to feel like I'm doing some good in the world. And, working for a bank that you don't get that kind of joy, but for nonprofits, you do. And I was really able and proud to see the impact that I did have. So about 3 years ago, I said, you know what, I'm going to specialize and I want to go all in as much as possible. Not to say that I wouldn't work for a for-profit company, but again, it has to have some kind of impact in the world and not just, increasing funds for shareholders.
Wow, that's so cool. And I love that. And this is what we teach too. Like learn a skill that's not going to go away to you, right? Not just something like hot and sexy by the seat of your pants kind of a thing, but learn a skill that's going to be around. And then you can open a consultancy and then you can even niche down. So even niching to a skill can be one niche process, right? And then you're like, okay, I'm good at CRM. I'm good at using these types of applications, right? And then saying, okay, and I can niche down from here to nonprofit. So I think it's a really cool example of even what we teach with grant writing, like learn the skill of grant writing, right? And then start a consultancy, and then you can niche down to maybe a cause area that you're passionate about. You can niche down to maybe a certain type of nonprofit or a geographic area where nonprofits are at. Like there's a way to do that. And actually by doing that, you're going to amplify your messaging more. So you're going to be able to get more unique in your messaging and very much more clear and get more clients, right? So a lot of people are scared to do that. So were you ever going, ooh, maybe there's not enough nonprofits out there? Or like, did you just see like that open wide niche, no one else going there, and you were like, I'm going to jump in and take this?
So before I answer that question, I actually also do coaching for Salesforce consultants, nothing to do with nonprofits. And I teach them that it's always a good idea to have what's called a T type of knowledge, where you want to have a little bit of knowledge in many different industries or aspects of a technology. And then you want to get really specialized or deep into one of them. But you generally want to start with that general knowledge, so you understand the landscape. And then you can decide over time to say, you know what, this resonates most with me, whatever it's, if an industry or a psychography or a region. And then, yes, become one of one. And I've noticed that there was a certain scare of saying, you know, if I reduce the possibility of my clients from everybody to just nonprofits, will I have enough business? And the answer is yes. Because the moment you specialize, the moment you niche down in something, you can really cater your marketing to that audience. Like if I was talking to doctors, if doctors was my client, I would use the word, you know, you and your patients. If I was talking to nonprofits, I say you and your donors or your constituents. If I talk to lawyers, I would say you and your clients. So using different wordings means I speak the language of your or the jargon of your industry. Therefore, I'm one of you. And even though you won't be able to, you know, get every single organization under the sun, the ones you do get will be much more tailored, much more specific. You'll get basically more fish as a result of it. And the one example I would say is, can you imagine if you're driving down the street in your car and you pass by a street sign and it says, I help people solve problems? That message probably won't resonate very much with you because it's too generic. But if you say, I help grant writers write better grant proposals for this and this and this, that will probably grab your attention because now it's very specific. So you might you'll catch more fish as a result of it.
I love that. And I love also the explanation of saying you do kind of want to have general knowledge. You don't have to have deep knowledge, but you want general knowledge too. And this is where we have people come into in our academy. And I love this because we can talk about like, you're generally going to want to know about different types of grants, right? So you don't necessarily have to be like the queen on federal grant writing, but you'll need to know, like, is that a client you're going to take on, right? Because those are different grants, foundation grant, state grant, federal grant, like all very different, right? And some people are just like, all I write is federal grants. All I write are foundation grants, right? And they can even niche down, but they need to know the difference between the two as well, right? So that's so good. I love that. And just specializing. So even after you've been doing it for a number of years, consulting, that is, you said a few years ago, you said, okay, I want to niche down. I want to really start serving more people with impact. But you also kind of preface that to say, but if somebody else comes to me, I can take them. So I also like that too. It's like, you don't have to be scared to niche so much because like you said, even if your messaging is on point to like, to your point, like just nonprofits or a certain type of nonprofit, it doesn't mean if somebody like a for-profit comes to you and says, hey, I need help with grant writing, or hey, I need help with CRM, you have to say no. You can still say yes, right? It's just, it helps with the marketing and where you position yourself and your branding and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah. So did you find that your business took off when you started niching down? Did you find like there was there a difference in your revenue? Was there a difference in the number of sales calls that you're getting? Like all of that kind of stuff?
There was actually a dramatic impact because I was doing two things at the same time. Not only did I niche down to a specific industry, but when you're a specialist in something, you can command higher rates. And I switched from an hourly billing model to more of a value-based pricing model or a retainer model. And my income doubled that year. And we're talking about significant numbers too. This is not like 40 to 80 kind of thing. This is significant numbers. So I was extremely proud and pleased with the results. And what I love about all these prices, because basically they're fixed prices, there's price certainty. And especially when working with nonprofits, they like having price certainty.
Yes.
It's not an hourly rate where it's like, imagine going into a furniture store and saying you want to buy a couch, but they don't know the price of the couch. They say, well, we have to make it for you. We think it'll take between this much and this much time, and therefore it'll cost you this much, but we don't know until we're finished building the couch. Like you would never buy that couch. I mean, I know I'm using a product as an example and we're talking about services, but there are other examples I could use as well. The idea here is that I provide a price and I stick to it. If I think that it's going to cost this much to you, I will deliver it at that price. And I don't have to worry, they don't have to worry about, any fluctuations or change orders or whatnot. The price is the price.
I love that so much. You probably saw me do that. Yay! When you said I quit hourly, and I was like, yes.
Yeah.
So, and that's so good. Like you mentioned, like that can automatically, I know when people we have come into our programs, when they stop doing hourly and when they switch to the retainer model, right away, we always see exactly what happened to you. We see an increase of revenue and we see a decrease of their time being spent on things, right? So it's also like, and I love the point that you made, because this is where people start thinking, but my nonprofit clients, they're so used to the hourly based, it's harder to get them to go to retainer, da, 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 da. Like there really is this fear, and some of it might have validity behind it. Like you mentioned your example with the couch, like, right, we get that, but sometimes nonprofits, they're like, oh, but then we want to nitpick every single hour and we have more control over you if it's hourly. It's almost like, maybe it's like that whole employee kind of vibe that they're just starting, you know what I mean? They're so used to that. So they're trying to like piece that out with a consultant. But when I tell them, I say, but if you do a scope of work, like you're saying, I'll do X, X, and X, and this is the price, and you can just budget for it. And I'm not going to come back with any surprises. And it's not going to be a different amount that you have to get approved from your board every month. Isn't that nicer? Right.
Mm.
And it is. Yeah. As you mentioned, like, have you ever had any conversations with nonprofits that want an hourly, but then you kind of show them what retainer looks like and that eases their nervous system? Like, can you talk about that?
Sure. First, I would say it's very difficult to transfer existing client that's on hourly to something that's more retainer based. They're just used to seeing it a different way, your interaction a certain way. You can, but it's difficult. And there are ways to do it, but that's obviously for another conversation. Better is to get new clients that are based on retainers, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And the retainer is just like a gym membership, right? You're basically, or an insurance policy, you're paying for something that gives them a certain access to you. It's up to you, of course, to manage that relationship, but you also want to see it as a partnership. You are not just an order taker. You are a partner. You want to have a vested interest in your client. You really want to take that approach, build the trust from the very beginning. One of the ways that I qualify clients is what I call the dinner date test.
Mm-hmm.
And that means basically is if I can imagine myself having a casual conversation with this person over a meal that's not necessarily about business, then I will most likely say yes to them. But if I can't imagine myself doing that, I will probably say no to them, because that already prefaces all the types of communication you're going to have in the future, so that when you do need to talk about scope creep or different things, you know that it'll be a more reasonable conversation. So that's like my qualifier for most clients these days.
Oh,
And
I love
then
that.
again, retainer, they're paying for a service. They don't care how fast you do it. You're actually incentivized to do it faster, which is better for them. But they're paying a known price, like you said. There's no surprises along the way, and there's something beneficial to that. To answer your question, I've never had a client saying, no, we need hourly. Every time I approach with a retainer base, they're like, fantastic, let's go forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to your point, those that are used to it, that's the hardest to, because there's something about it that they're like,
It's a mindset
yeah,
model.
yeah, it is a mindset. Totally. So it is good to say. And then for you too, like you had already been in business, being a full-time consultant for many years, right? Before you switched to this model. So not only increasing your revenue, has it also increased your just financial stability, because now you have like more cash flow projections versus hourly? Like, was that also a big change for you?
Yes and no, because every contract I had was always about 6 months or 12 months.
Ah,
So,
okay.
but knowing it's going to be an exact amount every month, yes, it does help for projections,
Yeah.
but it wasn't a big factor in the decision to go. It was more like well, there's a few factors of why hourly billing is not a good idea. And one of them was an income ceiling. I could not charge, $5,000 an hour. No organization would ever allow that amount. But if you are able to do a retainer based, I'm able to deliver faster. And then the faster I deliver, the more effective hourly rates go higher. So there's an incentive in the right direction. I want to deliver faster, of course, keeping a very professional level. I don't want to deliver garbage. But when you're incentivized on hourly to take your time versus you're
Yeah.
incentivized with fixed to speed up. And I can't
Yeah.
imagine any client saying, no, we want you to take longer to deliver what you're supposed to deliver versus, no, we'll have it tomorrow and you're good to go.
Yeah. And I see that a lot. There's actually a report done by Rachel Waterman. And I love pointing up this report. She did it on grant writers pricing their services. Really interesting report. She's done it twice or 2 years in a row. And what she found in this report was actually, and this probably crosses all consultants, the more experience that grant professionals, freelance grant writers, grant professionals got, if they charged hourly, the less money they made. And it was specifically to your point, right? And I think that's so interesting because what they're doing is they're getting so fast. You get to know your clients, you can do your work a lot quicker, you have things to pull from, like your efficiency speeds up. And then you actually start, if you're hourly, you actually then what happens is you get less and less money
You're
because you can do
penalized
it so
for being
fast.
better.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was in the exact opposite direction.
Yeah. Yep. And when you first start out, sometimes if you charge a flat rate, you actually get way less because you're putting in way more hours, right? So it's like this weird, it is like this weird curve that happens. And it's like, okay, let's just figure out what that looks like and set up efficiencies first. But I love that you have niched down and you're working with nonprofits now. So let's talk about the work that you're specifically doing with them. You're doing some CRM. So can you explain kind of to people out there that are listening or watching what exactly that is?
Sure. So I help in basically three ways. Either it's a nonprofit that has just made the decision to buy Salesforce and they need some kind of guidance to make sure that they can benefit the most from it. That's what we call a greenfield. It's brand new, never seen before. So I can come in, I can either do advising or consulting or project oversight to help make sure that the end result is going to be exactly what they need it for.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is when they already have Salesforce, but they're drowning in technical debt. Problem with Salesforce is that it's massive, it's super powerful, and the expression, great power comes great responsibility. Salesforce themselves only sell it as a product. They basically refer partners like myself to implement it. And so your experience of Salesforce can change dramatically based on the partner that you get. One partner could be fantastic, one could be not so fantastic. So I've had to come in a few times, parachute in, guns blazing, and fix what the last partner did because they didn't do it, according to best practice or following certain UX principles, user experience principles. So that's another way of just saving the organization from Salesforce. And the third one is everything's fine in Salesforce, they're running it and they want to build something new and they just want help, a new integration or a new module they want to add to it. And that's another way I can help.
I love that. I love that so much because I don't use Salesforce, but I use Airtable, right? So if you're familiar with Airtable is amazing and all the things it can do, but if it's just sitting there as software, I have no idea how to use it. And I'm not going to spend the time like necessarily to figure it out. But what I did do is I ended up buying my friend Ashley, she has this program SOS, and you can go in and say, make Airtable do this for my company. So we use it a lot when we're doing grant reviews. People can submit their grant reviews there. We get alerted, we can submit it, it tags them, it emails it out to them, like all of the things. It puts it in Slack. And that's amazing. But I don't think I would have been, I would have been able, let's say, take 10 hours of my life to sit down and watch tutorials and try to figure it out. But I don't want to do that with my time, right? I prefer, and it's more efficient to hire someone to say, hey, troubleshoot and help me with this software to make it do the things that I want it to do for my business. And that has been so amazing to now we can actually use it and feel the power that Airtable has instead of it just sitting there with potential. Like we're actually to see the actualization of it, right? So I feel like that's what you're helping with people do with Salesforce in a lot of ways, right? With nonprofits.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, anybody could learn Salesforce, right? But the idea is that if you hire an expert externally, for example, this is someone generally who's done this many times before. Yes. So it's more a cookie cutter. It's plug and play. They know the right directions to go and the ones to avoid. Versus yourself, you'll have to do all of that learning on your own. And that's not always like, I'm a big fan of delegating and outsourcing these kinds of things because I'd rather talk to a specialist who knows what they're doing versus me trying to figure it out. Unless I have a lot of free time and I don't have anything else better to do, but I'm pretty sure most organizations have their focus, like the nonprofits, for example, versus, technology is my specialization. So might as well talk to the experts for those things.
100%. Otherwise, you're really not utilizing the softwares that you may have or the tech that you have. And literally, I save so much time and money, like opportunity cost, if I hire Ashley to go figure it out and spend a couple hours and boom, it's done. And all the things are working, right? So it's like, it's really nice to have that, especially as more and more tech comes in to the nonprofit world. So why specifically do nonprofits like to use Salesforce? What do they use it for?
Yeah, I mean, first I want to make sure that's clear. Like obviously a big fan of Salesforce, but I don't believe it's the right CRM for every nonprofit.
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
For
Let's talk
sure.
about
There has to be a bigger picture, right? So I even actually had a friend of mine recently ask me if it's the right choice. They actually bought Salesforce, and I said, listen, it's not for you. It's overkill. It's like killing a
Yeah.
mosquito with a bazooka. You don't need so much power.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure, obviously, your technology you choose, in this case, your CRM, is scaled to what you want to do. And of course, not just for today, but also in the next 5 years. So you always
Okay.
want to plan for growth. So that being said, Salesforce is the number one CRM. It's massive. There's a lot of modules, a lot of power. So if you're a larger nonprofit, even a medium-sized nonprofit, I've never really heard of a nonprofit leaving Salesforce. It's usually they start with some small CRM that works for them when they're a small shop. And as they grow, they will start increasing their tech investment and then get to Salesforce. Salesforce usually is the top of that ladder.
Mm-hmm.
It's not very rare to go the other way around. So that's the benefit. All the features and functionality that are available to every other industry is available for nonprofits as well. And if you are a small nonprofit, Salesforce gives you 10 free licenses on their nonprofit platform. So you actually can have very little recurring costs once it's set up because it's free. So
Okay.
a lot. I mean, I can go on, but there's a lot of benefits
Right.
to Salesforce.
And well, for the functionality though of nonprofits, like CRMs, like we love Bloomerang, we love a lot of, different places like that as well for, we got to get out of spreadsheets. We understand that. Like we got to get out of spreadsheets. But CRM, can you just talk about that at a basic level? New nonprofit, what is that? Is that helping like with their donors? Like let's break down what that actually will help with.
I mean, at the core, it's a contact management system, right? So you're basically able to, in one place, a central repository, keep all of your contacts, all of your volunteers, all of your donors, and not just their contact information, but maybe birth dates or how they contribute to your organization, whether they're a volunteer or a donor, whether you're able to classify them as a major donor or a reoccurring donor. And these things basically, once you're in one central repository, especially with nonprofits with a lot of churn as people coming in and going, everyone you can get access to the same system. They can see the history of all the interactions you've had in the past. So you always want to have that central source of truth. Again, Boomerang is a great one. Virtuous, sorry, is another great CRM for smaller nonprofits, and then Salesforce. Those tend to be the top three that I hear most often.
Yeah, and that's so important. I love that because, a lot of nonprofits out there, they're not capturing that. And that's the thing that we as grant writers face as well, as a lot of nonprofits will come to us and they have no other funding. They have no other avenues. And they basically maybe even started their nonprofit because they heard, oh, you can get grant funding if you start a nonprofit. Like literally that's what happens all the time. And then they come to us and they're like, where's the money? Like we need some grant money, right? And we're kind of like, well, you also need to have other types of revenue coming into your nonprofit. And one of the ways that you should actually be starting is with some fundraisers, individual donors, corporate, all of that. And that is more of a healthy mix too. And then sometimes for grants, you need non-federal matching, all of these things. Like you need to have this more healthy mix, right? So that has them to kind of spin out because then they realize, okay, well, I guess we could do like a Giving Tuesday campaign or something like that where we can get donors, right? But then where to track it, right? So the beauty of the CRM is it also like it can remind them to send out emails, it can help with campaigns. Can you kind of talk about that to some people who might be a little more green and like, ooh, what does that mean?
Oh yeah, there's a laundry list of features. I mean, every CRM again has, email marketing, obviously, SMS messages as well. But the basic idea is you want to, having that central source of truth. The benefit really at one point is also reporting, because once it's all there, you can then figure out all these charts and graphs and figure out how things are moving along over time. Are your donors increasing, decreasing? Have the people been lapsed, right? Donors, can you reach out to them? So, knowledge is power, obviously. So the more you have and the more insight you can gain from the data you have allows you to make decisions. I'm a big fan of data-driven decisions.
Yeah.
So you need to have the data in there. It has to be, of course, relatively accurate as well and up to date. But once that's there, wow, you can do so much. Oh, yeah. So volunteering, program management, donor management, case management. I mean, the list goes on and on.
I love that. I love that you mentioned volunteers. Like you can recruit volunteers through this and keep track of them and know how to reach out to them. And when's the last time they volunteered? And all of that's like at a click of a button instead of like going through some forms or trying to
and
remember.
matching volunteers to opportunities. I mean, yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Okay, so what's going on for you in 2025 then? Let's talk about what's your consultancy? Are you going to keep leaning into what you've been doing? You have your podcast, like you have all of the things going on. Let us know. Anything new for 2025?
Not new, but definitely more focused. So, I mean, I
Love it.
love consulting. I'll continue doing that for advising and consulting. But what I really am passionate about the past little while is my app. So, Salesforce, you imagine, is a platform just like your iPhone is, for example, and you can buy apps or install apps on top of Salesforce. And I built one for nonprofits and specifically for Canadian nonprofits to do tax receipts. So, if you're a donor, you're donating to a Canadian charity that's running Salesforce. With my app, you can generate a tax receipt. I can do it like crazy amounts of, it's like tends to be for the larger organizations, but of course it can fit the smaller ones as well. And that's my focus.
I
And
love that.
because there's two flavors right now, or two editions of nonprofit package for Salesforce. There's an older one and there's a newer one. Right now, mine is on the older one, and I'm basically creating a new version for the newer edition. So that's where my focus is, and just kind of get that word out to say, hey, you know, this is an app you might be interested in checking out if you are a Canadian nonprofit.
Oh, I love that. That's so good too, to have that, it's an incentive for nonprofits, right? For individual donors, like, and corporates to be able to get that as well. So I love that so much that you can do it at a click of a button on your app. So
Yep.
good. Awesome. And doubling down in nonprofits, staying into that, loving the niche that you're in. So yeah. And
Even
then
more.
running your
Yep.
podcast. So Agents of Nonprofits, y'all, if you go to check that out, all the things that Alex is doing. So anything else you want to say before we close out today?
No, this has been a pleasure. Thank you. I mean, I could mention actually before we do, I do have also, I don't call it a newsletter because I find companies have newsletters. It's an email list where I help junior Salesforce consultants. It's not really nonprofit specific. It's just my way of also giving back to the community to say, look, I learned a few things along the way, and here's what I've learned to be able to share that knowledge back. So that's called the Good Enough Consultant.
Oh, I love that. Yes, we are all good enough. Love it. I love it
Absolutely.
so much. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the Grant Writing and Funding podcast, and we'll have to have
It's a
you back
pleasure.
on. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you,
All
Holly.
right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.